Welcome to this edition of the Beef Roundtable. This month, our discussion will focus on value-added cull cows. I'm Dr. Ron Lemonade, Beef Extension Specialist at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. The Beef Roundtable is available as a video at both the Beef Magazine and www.beefroundtable.com websites, as well as a downloadable MP3 at beefroundtable.com.
And I'm Burt Rutherford, Senior Editor with Beef Magazine in Denver, Colorado. Our first guest is Dr. Cody Wright. Cody is a professor of animal science at South Dakota State University, and he has experience in management practices that increase cull cow production. Dr. Wright, first, tell us a little bit about why you decided to focus part of your research on adding value to cull beef cows.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the invitation to spend some time with you here today. As you look at the overall profitability of a cow-calf operation, the cull cows and bulls typically make up between 20 and 25% of the gross receipts, and so it's not a small component of the dollars and cents related to beef production systems. And so if we can find a way to optimize or maximize the amount of profit that we can capture from those cull animals, it's going to be a benefit to our producers. And so we want to try to develop some really good, sound, science-based type management practices that we can implement, and do that with the consumer in mind, and keep the consumer comfortable with the fact that we're producing a safe and wholesome product.
Our second guest is Casey Davis. Casey cut his teeth as a cattle buyer and currently serves as a cattle buyer manager for JBS in Greenbay, Wisconsin, where he is responsible for oversight of about a number of cattle buyers. Casey, tell us a little bit about the business of buying cull cows.
Well, appreciate you guys having me on here today. I guess, one big thing when you're buying cull cows is, you're looking at the health of the cow. You're looking at the value of that cow for your operation. Every packing house is a little bit different. We look for different things, kind of have different specialties. But ultimately, my responsibility is to make sure that we have enough cattle here, on a daily basis to fill our plant's needs, and try to do that as cheaply as possible, and the right mix of cattle as well. So.
Casey, when you or your buyers are out looking in the sale barn looking to buy cattle, what are you looking for? Any specific kind of cow?
Well, here at our Greenbay facility with JBS, the biggest percentage of our cows are what we call no-roll cows, white cows, fed cows. A lot of different terms for that same term in the industry. That would be the largest percentage of the cows that we kill here. We also kill some utility lean cows, boners, breakers, that sort of thing. But predominantly the white cow is our main focus here.
Cody, we use the term cull cows in the beef industry quite a bit. Can you define for our audience what a cull cow really is, what it really means?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking with producers, you'll hear terms of keep cows or cull cows, and the term cull really means is really referring to an animal, be that a cow or a bull, that has, for whatever reason, kind of found their way out of the herd, so to speak. So if you look at the data, about 1/3 to 40% of the cows that are no longer fit for production fall into that category because of reproductive failure. And in most cases, they just flat out didn't get bred. So rather than keep an open cow over the winter, producers will decide to just put those cows on the market, and then they can go to directly to a slaughter plant like with Casey there, or perhaps go to a feeder that will put them on a high grain diet for a short period of time, and then run them through a packing plant. On the flip side of that, you'd have the keep cows, or the cows that are still productive, they're still sound, they're still fertile, they still have good teeth, and those are the ones that we're going to keep around and continue to produce feeder calves from.
Casey, how are market cows priced in the beef industry? How do you go about establishing a value?
Well, so basically you have two types of cows. You have your utility cows, which would be your canners, cutters, boners, breakers, and then you have white cows, which are almost two different categories, so to speak. The white cow is a premium cow that there's going to be a lot of cuts of meat pulled out of that animal, very similar to that of a steer. On the utility cows, it comes down to a matter of boning percentage, how much of that carcass is going to produce red meat, and it also comes down to lean point, how much of that carcass is lean meat versus fat meat, and that's the way, there's a lot of different terms, older terms, canner, cutter, boner, breaker, you'll hear heavy cutter, light cutter, a lot of different terms throughout the industry. There's not necessarily one set standard, but it boils down to the lean point of those animals is what really creates that value on those utility cows.
And Casey, when you refer to white cows, you're talking there about white fat versus yellow fat, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And what's the difference?
Well, a white fat cow is a cow that's been fed. She's been put on a high energy, high grain diet. It's just got more eye appeal to it. She'll have marbling in her meat, and it's just a more palatable, cuttable type of meat compared to the yellow fat, which comes off of grass.
So more like a fed steer carcass in terms of the type of fat, anyway.
Yes. Yes.
For both of you gentlemen, and I'll let whoever wants to go first arm wrestle, but you've all done some work looking at feeding cows to improve their market price, and as we just discussed, make them a white fat cow, make them a little more valuable hanging on the rail. Can you tell us some things that a producer can do to add some value, add some profit in this economic environment that we're looking at now?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things that I think producers should really keep in mind, and it really kind of starts with the seasonality of the markets, I believe, in terms of when you see market highs and market lows, and I'll let Casey comment on this as well, but the cull cow market tends to be maybe just a little more predictable, perhaps, in terms of its seasonality, with highs occurring during the summer months, and then as you start getting closer and closer to weaning time, at least for those of us that have a spring calving cow herd up here in the northern plains, where we're calving in February, March, April, maybe even in May, we're going to be weaning calves, preg checking, selling cull cows about the time you start to see the fall months, September, October, November roll around. And that's when you see a lot of cows go on the market. You start to see the market start to drop off just a little bit. And so from a producer perspective, anything that we can do to try to not only time that a little bit, time our marketing to those seasonal highs, but also either add weight, add fat, change the fat from yellow fat to white fat, as Casey mentioned. Anything we can do along those lines is going to be very, very helpful to our overall profitability. And so some of the things that we encourage folks to do would be to try to identify cull cows as early as possible. And that way, if we've managed them to achieve a body condition score of 5 or 5.5 at calving time in the spring, if we can identify a cull cow sooner, whether she lost a calf, whether she's got a physical ailment, bad eyes, bad udder, bad feet, whatever the case may be, the sooner we can identify her, the sooner we can get her on that market and try to capture those seasonal highs. In other instances, we maybe want to wait until fall. Cow's got a good calf on her side. She's raising the calf, and maybe she's 10, 11 years old, and she's just kind of physically starting to fall apart. Now we start taking a look at ways that we can add value to those females in terms of weight and fat and that kind of thing. And looking at grazing corn stalks, we have a lot of people around here that will run their open cows, their cows that didn't conceive. They'll just keep them with their bred cows. And the whole goal there is just to kind of keep them on those higher energy diets that you would feed to a pre-calving cow. Changes your timing, lets them add some body condition or some body fat, might help change a little bit towards the white fat market and things like that. In other instances, people will just take those cull cows and put them on green, and that's where you can keep them in the dry lot for 60 to 90 days. You'd use a high energy, high grain diet, whatever you had available. In our area here in South Dakota, it'd be corn. Other places it might be barley, it might be sorghum or something along that line. But get them in the dry lot, get some grain into them, add some fat, start working on changing that fat over to white fat, and then really try to capture as much efficiency as possible. And these girls are not inherently very efficient, but using technologies, the various implants and beta agonists and ionophores such as Rumensin or Bovatec, those type products, you really want to maximize the use of those to try to improve your efficiency as much as you can while those cows are in the dry lot.
Cody, how long do you think it takes to move a cow from yellow fat to white fat if you're feeding a high energy diet?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron, and we've seen some data that suggests some different numbers. I think it would probably take at least 60 days. I think you want probably 60 days minimum on a high grain diet to try to start getting that fat converted over. The data, some would say it takes even a little bit longer than that, but I'd say you should target 60 days minimum.
You know, and we talked a little bit about the seasonality in markets, okay? Casey, you know, from a packer perspective, do you see seasonality in the market? You know, and of course you're in Greenbay, but if you look at not only the Greenbay area and the draw for that plant, what about the rest of the country as well? You know, do you see some price differences throughout the course of the year? And how do you deal with that in terms of, from a packer perspective, shackle space and labor and storage of product and all that kind of thing?
Sure. I'm going to step back one question kind of in response to Cody. One variable in that is you've also got to factor in how thick of a cow is going in. You know, a leaner cow with not a lot of fat on, it doesn't take much to convert her to a white cow that is pretty easy, which is a more ideal cow to put on feed. If you're putting a fleshier cow in there, it's going to take more 75, 90 days, something like that. So on to your question, Ron, you know, we definitely do see seasonality, just like Cody talked about, you know, in weaning season there in the fall and things like that. There's always a big fall cow run that we plan for. We actually budget to run Saturdays. We'll amp up our kills. We have a nice flexibility here at our plant that we not only kill cows, but we also kill steers. And so we can flex our mix just a little bit. You know, if the cows are more profitable for us and there's a lot more of them around, we'll increase our cow kill, decrease our steer kill, and vice versa. When the cows are short during the summer, we'll kill more steers and less cows. So you know, that's one of the big ways that we have the flexibility. You know, we have the benefit. Other plants that are strictly cows, you know, they're putting in your Saturday kills, they're increasing hours. You know, as far as from a storage standpoint, you know, that's when you see a lot of the cold storage starting to fill up and things like that. They box and freeze the product. So
let me go back to a comment that both of you kind of alluded to, and that if you were going to feed one of these cull cows, do you think the most profitable cow would be one that, on a condition score 1 to 9 scale from the beef industry, the area uses a 1 to 5. But on a 1 to 9 scale for beef cows, you know, would it be more profitable to feed a cow that's in that 2, 3, 4 range, or would you feed a cow that's a 5, 6 and try to get more weight on her?
Well, with the 2, 3, 4s, they're definitely going to put on more weight. You know, the 4-5s, or the 5s and 6s, they're already a pretty big, heavy cow. They're going to put on weight as well, but they're going to more quickly start converting that weight to fat. And you can definitely over-fatten a cow as well. Just like in the fat cattle, you can run into yield grade 4s and 5s. It's the same situation with cows. So.
Yeah, and as Casey's right on the money there, and I appreciate the comment about the fat conversion and leaner cows. Ron, to answer your question, if I was feeding cows, if my operation was strictly looking at taking cull cows and fattening them for market, I'd probably start looking for cows in that body condition score 4 range. If you look lower than that, if you got cows in the 3s and 2s, starts to give me a little bit concerned on whether there might be some kind of an issue going on, whether you might be fighting neones or hardware or something like that that could cause those cows to be that thin. But you start getting in those 4 ranges, and you can get some pretty nice females that you can put on feed, and you can get some weight on them. Two things to consider. The first one is younger females will tend to do a little better than males as you look at them in the feeding conditions. Secondly, as they start to approach that body condition score 6 or maybe getting close to a 7, their efficiency in the feedlot will really start to drop off, and it's because of that fat that Casey mentioned. You're looking at a mature animal, so unless they're really young, like a heiferette type of situation, you're really not depositing muscle like you would be in a feedlot, for example. You might get a little bit of that where the muscle's kind of reestablishing itself, but for the most part, you're looking at body fat, and the more they put on, the less efficient they're going to be while you've got them on feed. So that condition score 4 to 6 range is a pretty nice target if it were me looking at putting a set of cows in the feedlot and trying to make a little bit of money off of them.
No, and along with this, we talked about seasonality of market. We talked about adding some fat. Casey, is there much difference between the USDA grades of commercial utility cutter canner from a seasonality standpoint? Is there a better time to sell a fleshier cow or a leaner cow throughout the course of the year? I mean, if you had to make some decisions, you're making a weaning decision, and maybe you're a spring calving or a fall calving, the seasonality of the market, okay, we said kind of starts to drop off pretty significantly during the fall when we start seeing the big runs. Is there a difference between, the quality grades or the leans, lights, boners, that kind of thing?
Sure. It varies. I mean, there's not the consistency there that you see in just the overall cow market, but there are some certain times of the year where that is a better target to hit, specifically on the lean cows. You come into early summer, you hit the grilling seasons, you hit the holidays, and then you'll see another little pop there for the lean meat around the time the kids are getting back to school, around that school lunch program time. Otherwise, the bigger decisions that you got to make is she healthy enough to go on feed? Is she the right body condition score? Just like Cody said, is she too lean that there's something wrong with her? That's the bigger opportunity. Another thing that's really hurt the value of the yellow fat, thicker cows, your 7s and 8s, 9s even, was when the whole pink slime scandal came to be. That really decreased the value of those fatter utility cows and increased the value of the leaner utility cows. So that's kind of started to blow past some, and that's starting to correct itself, but there is still some definite price differences between a lean cow and a fat cow.
Here's a question for both of you, and you can take turns with it. But traditionally and commonly, when a producer culls those cows and bulls and markets them, he or she just takes them to his local livestock auction. Are there opportunities for a producer to have a direct sale to the processing packing plant? And can that be an advantage to the producer?
Well, Bert, that is a very good question, and that's something we've actually been working on very hard here in the last few years in Wisconsin is educating producers on the fact that we do want to buy cattle directly off of producers. It's got some definite benefits for us as a packer. The less time that those cows are handled, the less opportunity there is for bruising, damage to the carcass, things like that. And it's got an advantage to the producer as well. You know, he's able to sell direct. He's cutting out extra expenses. The biggest thing is the feasibility of it. You know, if you're close enough to a packing house, if you have enough volume that it makes sense to where you can haul them there, you know, a producer that's 200 miles from his closest packing house that's only got 1 or 2 cull cows, obviously that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're 10 miles from the packing house, absolutely, it would definitely make sense. I can't speak for the entire industry, but I know the majority of the packers here in Wisconsin and this northern Midwest, we'll all take cattle right directly at the back door. If a producer has, you know, semi-load lots, we can always send out, you know, one of our buyers to look at cattle right on the farm as well. So there is definitely opportunities for the producers.
Do you think that there's an opportunity for producers to kind of maybe start to think about working together, you know, and so that they could put together maybe a semi-load locally? As opposed to marketing in a more traditional manner?
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously the less hands that the animals pass through, you know, the greater profitability there should be there for a producer. So any time that they could work together and try to put together loads and things like that, you bet.
Yeah, Ron, I think there's one that really is an opportunity for producers to explore. And one of the challenges that lots of our farmers and ranchers face is that they're not really set up to feed cows high grain diets, or they're in parts of the country where they don't have access to it without having to truck in loads of corn or barley or something like that. And I think there might be opportunities for them to start working together and maybe create a contract situation with a feeder, or if one of them has some grain, can have access to working together to put together some lots and capitalize on that. Another thing that we've taken a look at is to utilize these self-feeder technologies. There are some companies out there that have programs set up for finishing cattle on self-feeders, and we've done some work with those with cull cows, and they tend to work pretty well, very similar to what you would find with fed cattle. And for a producer that doesn't have a feeder wagon, maybe doesn't have bunk space or anything like that, taking a look at self-feeders or looking at moving their cattle to partner up with somebody is a pretty good opportunity that people should explore.
You know, we've spent a lot of our time focused on kind of the cull beef cow side, but dairy cows make up a significant portion of the cull cow market. You know, is there anything we need to add to this discussion relative to cull dairy cows?
Well, you know, this comes up a lot more with dairy cows than you see it in beef cattle, but drug residue is a major hot issue in the cow kill industry. Again, not just dairy cows, also in beef cattle, but you just hear a lot more, and the instances are a lot more. But that's a very serious offense. The USDA takes that very seriously. Our customers take that very seriously. You know, that just cannot be getting into the food system. You know, the entire animal's thrown away. That's lost revenue, and that's definitely a very serious topic that is coming up more and more all the time.
And, you know, if we've got consumers listening to our program, Casey, talk about the safeguards that the packing plant puts into place relative to something like an antibiotic residue.
Sure. Every producer that sells us cattle has to sign off on an affidavit that states that there is no drug residue in their animals. Unfortunately, not every producer tells the truth when they sign that affidavit, so we do have safeguards. Every animal that the USDA rails out, suspect for any reason whatsoever, is drug tested. The USDA randomly pulls a number of cows every day that they randomly drug test, and our own plant's food safety operation randomly pulls cows throughout the day. So it's probably 5% of the cows are tested, but they also watch for needle tracks, so to speak. If they see fresh injection sites, anything like that, absolutely, that animal is going to be one that's pulled. She's going to be drug tested. And they, if for any reason that she comes back positive, the carcass is condemned, the offall is condemned, the head is condemned. Every piece of that animal can be captured and condemned.
Yeah, Ron, Casey hit on a good point there. Even though we oftentimes don't think of cull cows as going in as this along the same lines as fed steers, we still want to make sure that we follow all the labels for any drug, any medication that these cattle are getting, and follow good BQA practices where we're giving injections in the proper sites, because they are going into the food chain. And so making sure you're giving injections in the neck, ahead of the shoulder, and places like that where you have lower value carcasses, those same rules apply to cows as they would to fed cattle. So another thing that can come up relative to cull cows, and this affects both dairy and beef cows, the industry kind of got a black eye a few years back with some downer cows that got onto a video and weren't necessarily handled very appropriately. We want to be thinking about any cows that have a chance at all of being a downer cow. Okay, so in other words, they're on the trailer, they go to JBS there in Greenbay. If they're down in the trailer, and Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't do anything with them. A non-ambulatory cow cannot go into the chain and into the food chain. She can't even enter the plant. And it doesn't matter if she was ambulatory when she became non-ambulatory. If she breaks her leg stepping off the trailer, she's out. So we have to be very cognizant of the physical health of these cows. And with dairy cows, you can have some foot issues and things like that, but we want to keep that in the back of our mind as we go forward as well. Any cow that can't walk off the trailer or basically can't walk into the knock box is probably in trouble.
Well, and to add to that, I think, that brings up another point, and that is, as you're managing a cow herd and you've got we're all going to have some cows that just don't conform to the herd standard, okay? And if we would realize that maybe sooner rather than later, okay, so that these cows don't get into that condition where they have the potential of being a downer, okay? And that could be too thin, could be, an advanced foot problem or whatever it might be. And so identifying those problems early and maintaining some cull cow value, I think, is a real key piece that producers need to kind of think about. So that may mean that we've got to early wean some of these cows, okay, to be able to move them into the market channel maybe a little sooner, okay? Maybe also be able to capitalize a little bit more on a seasonal high pricing structure as well. Guys, any last comments or take-home messages for our producers on how they might be able to add value to their cull cow market?
Well, just to kind of reiterate what you just said there, Ron, it comes down to making that decision on both beef and dairy cows. Do I treat this cow? Is she definitely going to get better if I treat her? Or do I go ahead and ship her? We see a lot of instances where a cow's been treated, and unfortunately because of withdrawal times and things like that, it could be 30 days before that cow's drug residue free and can come to market, and she's done nothing but in that 30 days go backwards. And that's where we see a lot of those downer cows and problems like that. A lot of times are where producers trying to keep that cow being productive, keep her in that herd, and she's gone backwards on them, and it's worked against them. So that's one of those decisions where these animals for productivity purposes, whether it be to produce a calf or produce milk, either one, those animals cost a lot of money, but 20 to 25% of the revenue off a beef cow herd is your cull animals. So that's something that you definitely have to keep in mind.
And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, okay? You're trying to do the right thing for the animal in terms of treating it, okay, for whatever the condition is. And then you've got on the other side, you've got the residue problem if they don't respond to an antibiotic therapy or whatever. So, it's a tough decision sometimes. Easy is it's not black and white, I guess is what I'm saying.
Correct. Absolutely. It is a very hard decision.
Yeah, and Ron, I think that's the key, is there's really not a right or wrong answer when it comes to what you guys are talking about there with respect to treating a given animal, or just flat, how do you handle cull cows? I get, we've got a lot of seed stock producers around here where they're challenged with the decision of, I've got an awful good cow that's produced a couple of really good bulls for me, and this year she came up open. What do I do? And the book basically says that she should go to town. She's open. I can't afford to feed her over the winter. But at the same time, every animal she puts on the ground is worth $4,500 or $5,000 as a bull in a seed stock industry, and that creates some challenging situations for producers to go through. And one of the things that I really like to tell my students is, when it comes to making any decisions on cull cows, whether it's early weaning, whether it's feeding, whatever it comes to, the two most valuable pieces of equipment that you own are your pencil and your calculator, and just crunch some and find out what's it going to cost to feed them, what's it going to cost to keep them around, what are they worth at various times during that seasonal market, and just start crunching numbers, and it's not very likely going to be the same from one year to the next.
Well, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, and it kind of relates to what you just said, along with kind of what we've talked about all along, and that is, sometimes we get hung up, in the beef industry of chasing premiums. Okay, and I tell my students and my producers that, maybe the most important thing that you can do is to avoid discounts. Okay, and things like, Casey, if you just weaned a cow, she's going to have a wet udder, right? And
Correct.
So, this cow is now hanging, on the rail by her back leg. All right, well, where's the udder at? And so now I don't really want milk, for example, dripping down that carcass, because now that becomes a food safety issue, Casey, for you guys, that you now have to deal with, so that we make sure that we've got a safe, wholesome, healthy product, going into the food chain. So, whether it's a wet udder or, that, if I was a buyer, I would probably put a discount on that cow. Okay, so maybe there's some advantages to, drying that cow off for a week or two. All right, so that udder is now a dry udder instead of a wet udder. And we could come up with some other examples, but, advancing cases of cancer eye, that's going to be a discount, because the potential for that carcass to be condemned goes up pretty significantly. Okay, if we start getting into some advanced stages of a herd health problem. So can you comment on that? Do you guys buy the idea of marketing to avoid discounts as opposed to necessarily chasing that white cow premium, or maybe that extra weight or condition on these cows? And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely those are two things that do make a factor. With that cancer eye cow, at best case scenario, you're going to lose that head. You don't think that there's a lot of meat on a head, but there is. There's a lot of value to that. We have specifically a head room that we, pull meat, pull the tongue, things like that. So you're going to lose that value, best case scenario. You're also going to lose, good chance of losing the entire carcass. With the wet bags, not only, is it a food safety concern, but there's also, milk weighs a lot, 8 pounds per gallon. Pretty quickly, that adds up to a lot of weight. You don't think of it, but 5 pounds or 5 gallon of milk's 40 pounds. Especially we see that on the dairy cows. You see some of these cows get pulled in here, and she wasn't milked for 2 or 3 milkings, and there can be 100, 150, 200 pounds of milk hanging in that bag, and that's just lost yield. That's one of our biggest factors when we're buying cows live, is what's she going to yield. And it's very easy to have a range from the mid-30s to the mid-50s. And 200 pounds of milk hanging off a cow is going to lose a lot of weight, a lot of yield in a hurry. One other thing is horns. Even cows that come to town that have been together, and this goes for cows or fat cattle, either one, cattle that have always been together in the same group, things like that, even if they're not using those horns against each other, fighting, anything like that, when you start handling them a lot, put them into trailers, they're bumping into each other, they're causing bruise, they're causing damage. I've several times, had a buyer buy horned cattle and taken pictures of the carcasses afterwards and sent it back to all the rest of my buyers, and it's unbelievable the amount of damage. Like I said, even cows that aren't fighting with each other, just simply by having them, that they're going to do some damage to those carcasses inadvertently.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Beef Roundtable. Bert and I would like to thank Dr. Cody Wright and Casey Davis for being our guests. Please join us again next month for another Beef Roundtable discussion.